Nailed with Cupid, sure shot, cause you were the finest one like Sailor Jupiter. Hot like stovetop, sexy in the clothes you rock, stacked like pancakes from top to your socks.
What's up, my Wizards Dev from SBMTG down there, channel on the YouTubes. We do decks. Something that people have actually been asking me for, like, kind of a lot. I haven't actually built a deck around this card. It's Graceblade Artisan. We're gonna do it for a whole $5. Apparently, I'm a lot more hype when I make a video during the day. Hey, Igby, what's going on? Well, like I said, this deck is about $5 on TCG Player. I think my cart rung up like $5.35, something like that. And no card in the deck is gonna cost you more than 25 or 30 cents. That's the most expensive piece. Pretty refreshing because I've been covering a lot of competitive decks lately. By the way, they're working on my apartment right now, so if you hear like loud Spanish in the background, I swear to you that I'm not holding Honduran immigrants hostage in the basement. Yeah, that'll throw them off the trail. Let's talk about the creatures in the deck. That's important when discussing Magic decks, and we're only playing 8 creatures in the deck. I'm sorry about that. There's just not really that many creatures in the colors that I want to play that interact well with auras or enchantments, so we gotta take what we can get. First of all, we gotta play 4 Graceblade Artisan in the deck. I mean, the deck is based around this card. Let's play as many copies as we can, so we'll see it all the time. Whether you call it Mega Man, some people call it Mega Man, and then some people call it Mario too, because it like puts on suits and gets better. That's hilarious. But whatever you call it, it's not like the best to build around in the format, but it is a really fun one. We can do it for super cheap, and it's kind of a good deck to pull out, you know, whenever you get a little bored with the standard deck that you're playing. You're like, hey, try to beat this. And actually, the card can do some pretty cool things, man. You can be swinging for a lot of damage by turn 4, depending on what you put on it. So we're going to try this out, and in testing, it has been the worst thing against certain decks, you know. Against like Mono White, for instance. If Mono White doesn't get their Declaration or their Silk Wrap or whatever removal they happen to be playing, this can actually race Mono White like pretty well, depending on what auras you slap onto it. So good against a couple of aggro decks in the format, but you're going to have to watch out against a lot of things because you really don't want to get like 3 for 1 because your Artisan died. Luckily, we're playing some protection in the deck against that. I'll get to that in a moment. But before I get to that, I should also say that we're playing a 4-of Blessed Spirits in the deck. And this sucks that this is a 3-drop and Graceblade also is. I wish this was, you know, a 2-drop would be amazing. Like a 2-drop 1/1 flyer that did this would be amazing. I just wanted to be somewhere else on the curve other than 3 because we got a lot of good 3-mana cost enchantments. Graceblade herself is a freaking 3-mana card, so I hate that this is 3 mana. But, you know, if you wanted to play other creatures, though, I could see playing green in the deck all day, because you get Herald with a Pantheon that way. Herald with a Pantheon can attack in a pinch, gains you some life to keep you up against aggro if that's what you want to do, you know? And, more importantly, lets you play auras for much cheaper, you know? You can play, like, 2 3-mana auras on turn 4 if you have a Herald and a Pantheon, so that would be good. I just didn't want the deck to be 3 colors. I felt like that would ruin the budget, all of that. So I'm just stuck with these 2 creatures here. But Blessed Spirits, even though I just gave it a bunch of crap for costing 3 mana, is still pretty good. You know, whenever you put an aura on your Graceblade Artisan, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Or you can just put auras on it if it's all you've got out, you know. And then your kids can get a +1/+1 counter and then whatever the aura gives to them too. So that's, you know, all of that is pretty good, right? Blessed Spirit's probably the only other thing that we get, and we take what we can get. But what is this deck without its auras, right? And this is what all the work went into, is figuring out the right distribution of auras. I've changed up a lot of different stuff a lot of different times and come to a few different conclusions as far as the auras in the deck. But one thing that's never changed is I've always played a 4-of Gryff's Boon in the deck. Gryff's Boon is awesome, man. On a Graceblade, it's basically +3/+1 and flying, which you get 5 power flyer on turn 4. And since it only costs 1, you can afford to play another 3-mana aura on your Graceblade and this on turn 4. That's really, really good, actually. It can lead to these enormous swings. So being able to stretch out your mana with a card like this is really, really nice. The real attraction here is the fact that our opponents are going to try and 2 or 3 for 1 us occasionally, you know, just by removing one guy. We lose him and the auras attached to him. It sucks. It's the worst thing about a deck like this. And with Gryff's Boon, we can mitigate that a little bit, you know. It can come back later in the game. So love that about it too. Just everything about Gryff's Boon is good. Decent buff, flying is nice, you know, it only costs the 1 mana, it comes back, perfect aura, and maybe one of the best ones in the format, if not, probably the best aura. We're playing a few 2-mana auras. I feel like that's important too, especially if we miss a land drop turn 4, you know, we can put a Gryff's Boon and a 2-mana aura on a guy. And these are actually super important. We're playing 4 copies of Angelic Gift in the deck. And yeah, I know Gryff's Boon gives flying, but I want as many ways to give flying as I possibly can because it's one of the more relevant things that you can do with a Graceblade Artisan. So love, love, love this card. The fact that it draws you a card is the actual draw here. That's no pun intended. Really, no pun intended. But, you know, the real feature is that it draws you the card. And it'll give a Graceblade Artisan, you know, suddenly he's a 4/4 flyer out of nowhere. So, and you have more mana to spend because 2 mana is all this costs. It's not bad at all. Really, really efficient. And again, flying is one of the best abilities you could give to a Graceblade. So I want as many ways of doing that as possible. I don't mind playing 8 ways. We're also playing 2 Murder Investigation in the deck, which looks sketchy, but again, they're going to try and kill our Graceblade. That is priority number 1 for them, is like 2 or 3 or 4 for wanting us. So if we can stick a Murder Investigation on the thing, then that really helps us out like you would not believe. And then we get to like spread out our auras a little bit later in the game. You know, we lose a Graceblade, we get 4 tokens or whatever, then we can spread out our auras. Not bad. So actually Murder Investigation's been really really good. At first, it was Grasp of the Hieromancer. I actually did like this card too, come to think of it. I felt like Murder Investigation was the insurance that we needed. Trust me, this deck needs insurance. Murder Investigation is pretty good as far as that goes. It's worked out pretty well as long as you can stick it. What will sometimes happen is you go to Murder Investigation on a Graceblade Artisan, and that's when, in response, they kill Artisan. That sucks. That really, really sucks. But again, we're running some protections, so we don't have to worry about it as much, but do be wary. But our 3 mana auras are like really where it's at in this deck. These are great auras, and one of them especially may be the other best aura in the format. I talked about Boon earlier being the best, and from a practical standpoint it probably is, but as far as just big, splashy, bomby, win the game auras, I like Invocation of St. Traft, and I'm going to play the whole playset here to make sure that we see it. This is great on turn 4 with the Graceblade Artisan. You know, you're suddenly swinging 8, split amongst 2 guys. One of them flies out of nowhere. And on turn 4, if you can put a Gryff's Boon and an Invocation on a Graceblade, you're doing crazy amounts of damage split amongst 2 creatures, both of which fly. So just like, that has happened more than once, by the way, because we're playing 4-ofs of all of those cards. Happens kind of a lot. So if they can't answer that, they're taking a ton. 11 damage to be exact, nothing to sneeze at on turn 4, especially considering both creatures fly. This is another way, again, you can just race aggro decks, you know? They can deal some damage to you fine, but they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do about the giant thing that makes a giant flyer whenever it swings. The other 3 mana aura we're playing is Battle Mastery. I'm going to play a full 4-of of this. At first it was just a 2-of, but I really, really like Mastery, especially late game, you know? Once their resources have dwindled a little bit and you know that you're going to stick the next aura you play, this can be game ending, man. Like, there will be times where you have a Graceblade Artisan, say an Invocation of St. Traft and a Gryff's Boon on it. I've already talked about that. And then later on in the game you play a Battle Mastery, and suddenly you're swinging for all the damage, like literally more than their life total, because Battle Mastery is crazy. Even if you have nothing else on Graceblade, she's naked other than this, you're dealing 8 damage in combat with a Battle Mastery. So I have really, really been a fan of this, and I didn't think I was going to be at first. Battle Mastery sort of has a bad rap for whatever reason, but in this deck specifically, the card is bonkers. And, you know, I really am more hyped during the day. I should do this more often. I'm just happy today. I got off work early, and I was like, yay, quick videos, so here I am. But anyway, that was random. I like telling stories. But anyway, let's finish off the enchantments here, the auras at least. We're playing 2 copies of Iona's Blessing in the deck. Iona's Blessing is... Oh. Hello. 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 Hi. Beautiful wife and sweet mother-in-law came home, so I came upstairs, because I'm a gentleman, and I want them to have the living room. I wasn't kicked out or anything. Anyway, let's finish off the auras here. We're playing 2 copies of Iona's Blessing in the deck. Blessing, super awesome at the 4-drop slot. I don't want to play any other 4-drop auras or anything. I just feel like the curve is nice, though. You know, the 3rd turn Artisan, 4th turn this. Suddenly you've got a 6/6 Vigilance that does other stuff. That's pretty good, but I don't want to go overboard or anything. I don't want to have multiple copies of this in my hand, although multiple copies on it aren't terrible. Don't get me wrong. I mean, each one is +4/+4, basically. But I don't really think that they're as vital as some of the other auras in the deck, and they're pretty heftily priced. So let's just keep it at 2, and when we find one, they're pretty good. Let's stop off before we go to the protection spells onto this thing. I don't really have a category for this. It's just like, it's Open the Armory. We're playing 2 copies of that because it helps us go search for auras. And that's good. I mean, it allows us to play less copies of certain auras, you know, I like that about it. And we are still playing 4-ofs of the very important auras, yes, but, you know, this, no matter what, allows us to go search up an aura, even if it's one we already have on an Artisan. We don't care. We'll just go put another one on. Who cares? Last thing I'll talk about main deck is these protection spells that I keep bringing up. Incredibly important if we're going to be successful ever in this deck. There's so much good removal going around, and we can't get like 2 or 3 for 1 because they remove our Graceblade Artisan. So we got to have a couple of ways of protecting it, and we have a couple of ways in the format that actually do different things besides just protect it, you know? So with that in mind, we're going to play 4 copies of Center Soul and 3 copies of Negate. That's right, 7 whole protection pieces, but they do more than just protect Graceblade. The important one to really point out here is Negate. Negate is just amazing whether you're countering removal on your Graceblade, and mass removal sometimes as well, or you're countering things like Planeswalkers or Collected Company, Pyromancer's Goggles. There's so many good targets for a Negate in this format that it's more than just protecting your Artisan, you know? There's a lot of stuff you can do with Negate. Center Soul is a 4 because it's so awesome in the deck. It's a 1-2 punch. It does 2 important things for us, both providing protection for our Graceblade Artisan and then rebounding to make it unblockable against certain boards, you know? So sometimes we can not only protect our guy, but get through a huge swing with Graceblade Artisans. So card is fan-freaking-tastic in this deck specifically. Here's the lands right here. We're playing 23 of them, and there's not much too special except Rogue's Passage. I do want to play a couple, at least 1, but I'm playing 2 copies of Rogue's Passage in the deck. We see a lot of, you know, decks that rely on board state. We got a lot of tokens in the format, things like that. So I like to have a land in the mana base or a card somewhere that allows it to go, Graceblade Artisan to go unblocked. And yes, Center Soul can do that, but it doesn't work against everything, you know. If they have a specifically red and a specifically black creature, let's just say, on the battlefield, they'll still be able to block, you know. If they have Eldrazi Scion tokens, they'll still be able to block. Or Eldrazi of any kind, they're colorless. Can't do anything about that with Center Soul. So we can still get through with Rogue's Passage against big board states and such, and certain creatures, and that's important. Here's our sideboard here. Lots of important stuff here. You know, not only do we have even more protection in the form of Dispel and Negate, but remember that, you know, Dispel can counter things like Collected Company and other instances in the format, you know, not just specifically spot removal. And Negate, good to fill out a playset because against certain decks, we'll want to counter Planeswalkers, we'll want to counter some artifacts, you know, Pyromancer's Goggles mostly, Collected Company, there's that card again, just a million different things that we can target with Negate, and I've boarded it in a lot. More Murder Investigation against especially removal heavy decks. The card is fine. If you don't play into removal when you're playing the card, then it's a good card. Just you have to be crafty about it. And then I guess the last thing I'll talk about is Displacement Wave. Actually, I will touch on this real quick. Pacifism and Stasis Snare. Decent removal in this deck because they remove creatures and give Blessed Spirits +1/+1 counters. So that's decent synergy there. And we got to play some removal in the board. And then Displacement Wave, great against the tokens decks in the format. That's really all I have to say about that. Here are your power rankings here. A final score of 46. That's a pretty low score. And there's not really a whole lot of ways to upgrade the deck. Probably a couple things, you know, but this is not necessarily the kind of deck that's meant for upgrading, you know. It's a kind of deck that's meant to exist as sort of a casual thing in Standard, play it against your buddies, use it to play test against, you know. It's a good sort of, is this deck good at all? Let me play test it against this stupid thing. So, you know, it can be played against pretty easily, but it's a fun deck, you know, it's $5. So try the deck out, super, super low to order on TCG Player, and just have some fun with it. That's all I got for now as far as this deck goes. Remember to check out the top 10 commons in SOI Standard. Just did that video today too. And we'll have the top 10 uncommons coming soon as well. And I've got a bunch of deck techs coming up. You all know Crawling Sensation, a black deck of some kind. I'm not really sure. I was going to build Big Black, like Big Red, you know, and worthy of jokes. But I've decided that Big Black is an awful lot like this deck. The $50 Mono Black Control deck is no longer $50 because Kalidas is ridiculous. But that deck looks an awful lot like this deck. So I might do Mono Black Sacrifice or something else. I haven't decided. I'm doing another Clue deck here. So I'm just a ton of things coming up. So sub if you're new and then like the content if you enjoyed it. You can also share if you want to. And then talk to me as well. I just do the YouTube stuff. I had somebody ask me through email, which is like a pretty personal way of asking this, is Ziggy dead? Ziggy's here. Mwah. He's giving me kisses and everything. So Ziggy's here. He's still sweet. And I just wanted to let you guys know that Ziggy's cool. And I'll see you guys later. I'm Dev from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Anyway, I just really don't see too many creatures in the format in the colors that I want to play that